Hello everybody! The video I originally had planned for you guys isn't ready yet, so I decided that I would do something different. As you can tell from the title of this video, I am finally taking the political compass test in front of everybody. I've taken the political compass before years ago and it gave me lower right quadrant, but I haven't taken it in a long time and I've never taken it in front of people, so let's see how this goes. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept, this is the political compass. It's a visualization tool for sort of cataloging and categorizing political ideologies on a X and Y axis rather than just a simple left-right paradigm that you usually hear about. I find it to be a useful visualization tool because otherwise you have like hardcore libertarians and neo-Nazis on the same end or corner of the political spectrum, which is just philosophically dubious at best. And so this, I think, is far better, more, for lack of better words, scientific. Now, there are issues with it. It can be limiting just having the two axes, but the bigger problem I find most people have with the political compass is not the visualization tool itself so much as the tests that usually accompany it. Unfortunately, though, the way they tend to ask questions tends to privilege one corner of the spectrum or another, depending on who made that particular quiz. And so that is the real problem with the political compass, is that it's the test that usually comes with it. Is there a way to make a good one? I don't know, maybe I'll try some point. But right now, I'm going to be taking the one that is on politicalcompass.org. A link to the test can be found in the description. For now, let's see where I fall into this. Before taking the test, please note that this isn't a survey and these aren't questions. They're propositions. To question the logic of individual ones that irritate you is to miss the point. I think you're kind of missing the point yourself, but whatevs. Some propositions are extreme and some are moderate. That's how we can show whether you lean towards extremism or moderation on the compass. Your responses should not be overthought. Some of them are intentionally vague. Their purpose is to trigger reactions in the mind, measuring feelings and prejudices, rather than detailed opinions on policy. Yeah, this kind of stuff makes the test not as good. All right, first question. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. Now, once again, you could tell sort of the mindset behind the people writing this. There are these people who think, quote unquote, corporations aren't people, or that, people are more important than other things. They completely disregard the concept that what's good for corporations can in fact be good for people. Since corporations are, made of people and they pay people, So, yeah, it's completely ignoring nuances like that, which is one of the reasons why many people don't like these tests. Yeah, so if I had to pick one here, I would probably pick disagree. I disagree with the notion that they shouldn't primarily serve humans because I think they're not, like the test doesn't have enough nuance in it. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. Also, once again, the way it's phrasing this is implying a number of things, but I would have to say disagree. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. This I also disagree. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Strongly disagree. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Also strongly disagree. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Agree. Not strongly agree, but mildly agree. It all depends on the situation. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Disagree because that's kind of what I'm giving you now. That's my job. Now the economy. We're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. I think wars would tell us to disagree. If you want to talk about peoples in an individual country like the United States, it might be class. But globally, I still think we're still more divided by culture, religion, and nation than we are by class, The workers of China have more in common with the elites of China than they do the workers of the United States. That's how World War I happened. That's why all the socialist writers were wrong about World War I. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Mildly agree, once again, nuances when it comes to policy, but I would agree because if you have really bad inflation, a poor person still has to pay those higher prices, regardless of whether or not they have a job or not. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. Disagree because corporations voluntarily protect the environment all the time. In fact, if you look at the history of many environmental regulations and other similar kinds of regulations for health and safety, most of those regulations were lobbied for by big corporations themselves. Of course, that's mostly to obtain something referred to as regulatory capture. Basically, corporations ask for the government to put regulations in place in order to keep smaller competition out so that way they don't have to compete with them. But yeah, corporations request regulations all the time. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is fundamentally a good idea. And this is another issue with this, because here's the thing. This is obviously the Marxist creed, The problem with this is that it depends on what context you're thinking of it in, It's like each according to his ability to each according to his need in the context of like the nuclear family is of course a great idea. It's like if you're a parent and you have children, you're not going to be charging your children rent or charging them for food or stuff, especially not when they're under the age of 18 or still in high school. But that's the way basically families operate. However, outside the context of a family, this is a very bad idea. You're basically having the state treat all the citizens as children, which is not a good idea. And so that's why I would strongly disagree. The freer the market, the freer the people. Strongly agree. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. Disagree. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Strongly disagree. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Also strongly disagree. This is built on an old assumption that kind of contributes into anti-Semitism as well, that basically, this isn't a real job. This is one of the big motivations behind like a lot of like modern day internet socialists. They think, landlords don't do a real job and therefore they don't deserve the, wages or the money they earn from me paying rent. It's this whole idea of what counts as real work and what counts as doesn't. And it's funny because a lot of the same people who are claiming, that, landlordism or being a CEO isn't a real job are the same people who are constantly telling you that sex work is real work. So, they're kind of just hypocrites on that point. And so I strongly disagree with this point. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I mildly disagree there. I think there are very limited situations in which protectionism is necessary. Only, however, as a tool to open up further free trade. If a country decides, we're not going to trade with you, then you can place protectionism on their goods in order to help, in the negotiations. But once again, that is a case-by-case basis, which is why I usually disagree with protectionism. There is a case you could argue for it, but I'm usually against it, which is why I still mark disagree. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. That, I think, is mostly agree to that. Obviously, don't do bad stuff, but that's the point of a corporation. They wouldn't exist if they weren't delivering profits to the people who invested. The rich are too highly taxed. I mostly agree with that, though I don't like putting strongly agree on much of any of these things. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. There's nothing wrong with that. That's, pay more, get more. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Mildly disagree. Once again, it's all about the context of the situation. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Strongly disagree. Strong restrictions do not correspond with a free market. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Okay, this one I do strongly agree with. All authority should be questioned. Mildly agree. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Mildly disagree. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Strongly agree. Should schools not make classroom attendance compulsory? Mildly agree. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Strongly disagree. That just sounds like racism, Except for furries. I've seen footage from Rainforest. You guys should stay away from your own kind as much as possible. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Disagree. Not strongly disagree. There are once again, mild situations in which, the use of force against a child is kind of the only way to stop them from doing something. There's this idea that, you can just reason with like a very young child. And it's like, no, you can't reason with a very young child. They're not operating on reason. So sometimes you have to use physical force. Now, should that physical force be a strike? I would avoid that, but, very situational. I would lean against it, but there are times when some amount of physical force is needed in order to deter bad actions from a child. Any parent would understand this. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. I agree. That is something everyone, it's natural to keep secrets from your parents. Whether or not it's right is a different story. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Strongly agree. Prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Mildly agree. I also think instilling proper civic values is also something important. People with serious inheritable disability should not be allowed to reproduce. Strongly disagree. That is just straight up Nazism. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. Mildly agree. That accepting discipline is important. It's important to understand that there are rules in a society and that there are consequences to said rules, and that's what discipline is all about. There are no savage and civilized peoples, there are only different cultures. Agree, yeah. I think there are more savage or less savage cultures, but yeah, they are different cultures. It's yeah. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not accept society's support. Agree. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. This is tough. I wish there was a middle position here, because it depends on what the trouble is. Yeah, that's highly dependent upon, I'd say mildly disagree, because it depends on what the trouble is. Is it something that you actually have control over, or is it something you don't? Because, if it's something you don't have control over, there's not much point in worrying about it. And if it's something you do have control over, then it's something you should definitely be worried about. So, it's a little lack of information here. First-generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. Strongly disagree. The only thing that didn't integrate with my grandfather was the fact that, his accent. That's the only thing that didn't fully integrate. And even then, his accent was watered down more than my grandmother's was before she died. What's good for the most successful corporation is always ultimately good for all of us. Mostly agree. There are individual situations where it could not be the case. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Strongly agree. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Strongly agree. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. Disagree. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Strongly disagree. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Strongly agree. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Once again, this is another one of those situations where they don't really put enough, I think, nuances to the question. Disagree mildly, just because I don't know what nuances are at play here. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Mildly agree. I used to be a lot harsher on, abstract or modern art, but now I've just come to stop caring about it. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. This is, once again, it's difficult. There are nuances that would make the situation different, obviously, but I think you need both. I think you need a bit of both. Of course, it's asking which is more important. Mildly agree. That's gonna be which, punishment or rehabilitation is really which one is more important really depends on the circumstance. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. Disagree. I think if they are capable of rehabilitation, it should be tried. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. This is also another false dichotomy where basically it's saying, the business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist, ignoring the fact that writers and artists are, in and of themselves, businesses. It's like, if you're an artist, you are manufacturing some piece of art, and then you are also trying to sell it, so you're also a businessman. So I find this question to be a false dichotomy here. I'll put mildly disagree, mostly because it's just a badly worded question. Mothers have careers, but their duty is to be homemakers. It's the homemaker part that I disagree with. It's the homemaker part I have a problem with here. If by homemakers they mean it's to, nurture and raise, good children, then I would say yes, if that's what it means to be a homemaker. But once again, I'm willing to bet that the creators of this test don't think that. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. Disagree. This would be less of a problem if most, global south or third world, whatever word we're using to describe these poorer, less economically developed countries. It would be less of a problem if these countries didn't usually have a national monopoly on resources. Because like a lot of things a lot of these countries have is that the government basically owns a monopoly on all natural resources. And so if you want to use any natural resources, you have to pay the government to use it. And that's usually what makes this situation a problem. If they had, more private ownership of resources, this issue here would be less of a problem. Because, because the government can, because this is the whole thing CGP Grey talked about in a video once, where basically if the wealth of a nation is not derived from the people of that nation, then the government can basically ignore the rights and needs of its people. If those resources were privately owned, then these foreign, multinational corporations would have to negotiate with the people who own the resource rather than the government, who doesn't have to seek consent from anyone. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Strongly agree. Astrology accurately explains many things. Strongly disagree. You cannot be moral without being religious. Mildly agree, though once again what counts as a religion can be debated. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. Mildly agree, it's like unfortunately charity has been weakened over the past century due to more and more government involvement in things like welfare. Some people are naturally unlucky. Mildly agree. There's some people just cannot get a break, and it's not some like devious plot to undermine them, it's just, damn, that's bad luck. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. Disagree. This has been a notion of Lutherans for a long time, because like a long history of Lutherans in the United States is they actually tend to prefer like parochial schools. Like basically similar to Catholics for a long time in American history. Catholics usually preferred like private Catholic, like priest-run schools because in the public schools in the United States for a long time until the 1960s were basically, whenever they had any kind of religious values preached, even if they were supposed to be religiously neutral, were in fact, like Protestant, mainline Protestant values, something like that. Well, of course, mainline Protestants and most other Protestants in general not only differ from Catholics, they also have big differences from Lutherans as well. Lutherans tend to be more liturgical, and so we tend not to be in line with the rest of Protestants. So that's why for a long time, Lutherans usually opposed sending their kids to public schools. Sex outside of marriage is usually immoral. My religious convictions tell me to strongly agree. But unfortunately, though, this test doesn't, have a descriptor of, this test doesn't create a differentiation between what you think public policy should be and what you think private morality should be. It tries to fuse the two together, but it doesn't create, I think, a very accurate test. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Agree, though once again, I'm thinking of it, trying to go through this page as thinking of like public policy rather than like private morality. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Agree. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. Mildly agree. And here is where I stand. Yep, lower right quadrant as I took it last time, though I think now I am closer to this area here than I was before. I think I've taken the test before and gotten closer to down here, and now I'm more up here. I think that's because of becoming more religiously knowledgeable in that time. So yeah, that is my political compass test. I'm still in the lower right quadrant, though I've moved up a bit since the last time I took it, back when I got a good deal younger. Though I think I took a different version of the political compass test. I think this version of the political compass test was probably written by more, like, if I had to guess, it's probably written more by people somewhere on the left side of this of the compass. Yeah, I think you can definitely make a better one than this, because that's what most of the difficulties with this test and most of the complaints of it are around the test, rather than, I think, the visualization tool of the compass itself. Alright, well, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope I'll have something a little more substantial for you next week. I'd like to thank my patrons for making this video possible. Their support at patreon.com/casualhistorian allows me to take a little extra time to make the better videos and let these videos serve as fill-ins. So thank you all for watching. I will see you all next time.